Alan is not an easy act to follow. I suppose the first thing to say is, good job I've retired from racing. But look, it is absolutely wonderful to be here. Alan, thank you for those beautiful and generous remarks. And I'll have a little more to say about Alan in a moment. But it is so good to be amongst friends who are united for a very good cause. I naturally acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues. Senator Brian Burston, thank you for being here. David Elliott, Minister of the Crown here in New South Wales, thank you for being here. Of course, the legendary Fred Nile, thank you for supporting me. Indeed and in prayer for the best part of 40 years. We first met back in 1978 and we've been friends ever since, and you've made a wonderful contribution to this Parliament and to this country, and our nation is in your debt. I should also acknowledge today someone who doesn't get a lot of acknowledgement but who deserves it, because in those dark days when the cause of our Crown in the Constitution was under most threat, was in most peril, one of the very first people who rallied to the cause was Nick Hobson, former Wing Commander Nick Hobson. Nick was the Executive Officer of Australians for Constitutional Monarchy. It was just Lloyd Waddy and Nick Hobson originally. They did a wonderful job. I was incredibly lucky to find such a strong foundation laid by Nick and by Lloyd when I joined the organisation back in 1993. And I do want to say thank you to you, not just for your wonderful words today, but for everything you have done for the people of Sydney and now the people of Australia, to whom you broadcast just about every morning. I want to say thank you for everything you've done for so many good causes, of which the Crown in our Constitution is not the least. Of course, I thank you for your wonderfully eloquent exposition, which was repeated today in defence of the Crown in our Constitution. But this above all, one of the most notable characteristics that we Australians have is our support for the underdog. We are instinctively in favour of the underdog. There is no one in this country's history who has been more consistently and unambiguously a champion of the underdog, a voice for the voiceless, than Mr. Alan Jones. And it's so typical that you lent your powerful, eloquent and persuasive voice to support the Crown in our Constitution in the days when it had so few defenders. I have to say that at least today things are much better. I want to tell you one story from my time as Prime Minister. It was my privilege to welcome Prince William and the Duchess of Cambridge to Australia, along with the Governor-General, back at the end of 2013. And both as Prime Minister and as a local member, I went to a couple of events that the royal couple were attending in my electorate. First, an event in support of Bear Cottage, which some of you would know, a hospice for children with terminal conditions in my electorate at Manly. And I turned up 10 minutes or so before the royals were due to arrive, and there was a really warm crowd of about 300 or 400 people having a street barbecue. And I thought, isn't this a wonderfully informal way to not just welcome the royals, but to let them know something of our Australian character and way of life. It was a wonderfully encouraging moment for me as a supporter of the Crown in the Constitution. And once this event was over, I got in the car to drive down to Manly Beach, where the royals were going to inspect some of the surf lifesavers and the Nippers, who were part of the surf lifesaving movement on Manly Beach. And as I drove down Darley Road, there were more and more people lining the streets. And as I went into Wentworth Avenue, they were 5 deep. And by the time I got to the Corso, there were crowds 20 deep. The police estimated at 20,000 people there, just to say thank you and we support you to William and Kate. And as someone who had lived through the Queen's Annus Horribilis, to see such an outpouring of just natural human warmth for these wonderful young royals was a truly heartwarming moment. I did not think I would live to see the day when Australians would respond with such warmth to members of the royal family. And what this suggests to me, as I'm sure it suggests to all of you, that even now, in this ultra-modern era, when we judge all things by price, when we judge all things by their immediate utility, there is a hold that the Crown has over the human heart. In the end, the case for the monarchy is instinctive and emotional as much as intellectual, and by God we saw the hold, we saw the magic of the monarchy on full display that day in late 2013. But I do want to take up some of the points that Alan made as well. We have a wonderful system of government in this country. It would be very hard to improve on our system of government. And it's noteworthy that whenever a Republican is attempting to mount the case for any particular kind of change, they always try to say, well, in fact, you can have just as good a system without the Crown. So they accept that it is a very good system. They accept that it is a very good system, and I say to them two things. First, if it is a very good system, why do you want to change it? And second, you cannot create the same system without the Crown. It is simply impossible. Again, as Alan has so eloquently put it earlier today, the role of the Crown, the active role of the Crown, under our Constitution is entirely discharged by the Governor-General. But there is a world of difference between a distinguished Australian representing the Crown and a President, either elected by the people or elected by the Parliament. Either way, elected by the people or elected by some supermajority in the Parliament, this individual would have a stronger mandate than the Prime Minister. And any system that has, in a sense, two rival and competing heads is a system which is doomed to trouble. We have troubles enough as things are without inflicting more trouble on ourselves, without a self-inflicted wound, which is what any move to any conceivable republic would be. Support for the Crown in our Constitution has nothing whatsoever to do with nostalgia for Mother England. We support the Crown in our Constitution because it's best for us, not because we have inherited, in large measure, our system from Britain. Nevertheless, because Britain is the mother of parliaments, because Britain is the source of the English language, because it is the font of the common law and so much which has shaped the modern world. Indeed, you can't imagine the modern world without the influence of Britain. The modern world has, in a sense, been made in English. It is worth looking at some recent developments in the United Kingdom. I have to say that I was a reluctant Remainer when considering this whole question of Brexit. I was a reluctant Remainer, not because I thought that Britain needed Europe, but because I thought that Europe most assuredly needed Britain. Nevertheless, despite publicly supporting by a short half head, to use another racing metaphor, Alan, supporting by a short half head the case for Remain, I was so thrilled when the British people said we want to take our country back. We want to take And sure, there were many factors in that vote. There was dismay at the economic difficulties, the economic straitjacket, if you like, that the euro has imposed on so many of the countries of Europe. Yes, there was dismay at the border protection chaos which Europe now suffers from, and thank God it doesn't happen in our country as well. And look, please, a standing ovation for Mr. Alan Jones. It's not often that people come all the way from Melbourne just to introduce me, but he does have to go all the way back to Melbourne now. When I heard Alan on the radio this morning, I was thinking, my God, he's supposed to be introducing me at lunchtime, and here he is saying that he's got to be at Flemington early tomorrow morning. But look, this is the effort that this man makes for good causes. But to get back to Brexit, there were many factors. The euro, the border protection crisis, a desire to be rid of the bureaucracy of Brussels. But in the end, what the British people were doing in that vote was saying decisively, we are not Little England, we are Great Britain. We are Great Britain. And I am confident that what we will see in the years and decades to come, flowing from this vote, is a more assertive United Kingdom, a more powerful United Kingdom in the affairs of the world, and that surely has got to be a very good thing for all of us. In conclusion, let me just say this. The task of every citizen is to do whatever we can, to do whatever each of us can to leave our country a better place. And that doesn't just mean talking, although that's obviously a part of it. It means acting. And in this modern era, when so much is forgotten, when so much is glossed over, there are a few more useful things that we can do than remind people of our history, remind people of the enduring strengths of our Constitution. The Crown has been with us every step of the way. It's never harmed us, it's often helped us. That's why we are so proud of it. We support the Crown, not because we believe in the Crown, although we do. We support the Crown because we believe in ourselves. We support the Crown because we have Australianised it. It has been with us every step of the way, and how could we rip it out of our system without doing violence to what we are and how we've got here? So it is a wonderful thing to be here amongst so many people who have been supporters of the Crown and our Constitution in good times and in not so good times. I pledge myself to do whatever I can in the months and years and decades ahead, not to let you down, and to do everything that I can to ensure that we build the best possible future on the great strengths of our country, and that includes the Crown in our Constitution.
Well, weren't they extraordinary? You know, when I was a little boy, politicians were much like Tony. I remember when my father used to get me to listen to the wireless, as we called it, and we'd hear the opening of an election campaign. In those days, they weren't the contested affairs they are today. And Robert Menzies would be there, and he'd be answering interjections from the audience constantly. I remember one in particular, which I found again recently, as someone screamed out to him, "Bob, tell us what you know, it won't take much time." To which Mr. Menzies replied, "I'll tell you what we both know, it won't take any more time." But politicians, like Tony, were so much like everybody else. When you think of Chifley and Curtin shuffling around in the morning to share a bathroom at the Currajong, when you think of Menzies leaving office without much money and a fund having to be raised to get him and Dame Patty a house, and McKell being found in poverty, things were very different. Things were very different, and I think that's reflected in the attitude we have today. I have been designing, writing, preparing a letter to the Pope about this, and I thought I'd begin, Your Holiness, I know we've agreed to disagree over the Falklands, but when it comes to making saints, I wonder if you've ever thought of one thing, and that is that I've detected something among politicians, that those who don't parade their good works, those who are principled, those who move from principle, but those who try to hide their good works are the ones who are really worthy. And that applies very much to Tony. In all those years with the life-saving and the wearing of the life-saving uniform, which seems to upset the commentariat, and the bushfire fighting and so on, that was never made public. That was something he didn't care about. He knew that you didn't have to go onto public transport and have selfies taken to show your virtue, as some members of Parliament do. I remember, for example, David Cameron. David Cameron once decided to ride a bike from his house to the Palace of Westminster. And this no doubt showed his virtue, you know, he's saving energy, he's global warming and all that sort of thing. He's riding along there on his bike, and one of the mischievous British press people pulled back the cameras because the cameras were concentrating on David Cameron. It's like they pulled back to show the chauffeur-driven car with the briefcase and the papers and so on to take to the House of Commons. You don't need to do that. It's the same with both of our speakers today. They're both strongly principled people. They both move from those principles. They both act in the public interest, and both of them, both Tony and Alan, keep a lot of what they do away from the public gaze, and it's quite extraordinary. Alan, for one, for example, Alan's the reason why, I would never have done it before, Alan's the reason why I accepted a brown paper envelope, and it was publicly in the mall in Sydney. This brown paper envelope was handed to me, and what it was Tom Switzer from the Australian phoned me. The ABC had massively funded this book, which would expose Alan Jones and destroy him. And Tom Switzer said, well, why don't you write a review of this? This is Jonestown. I said, oh, okay. I said, well, I'll do it on two conditions. I won't pay a cent for that book, even if you refund the money to me. And secondly, I won't be seen with that book in public. So Tom Switzer, who was in the opinion of the Australian, met me in the mall and handed me this brown paper envelope. Well, I think we have heard some wonderful words today from two very wise men who act constantly in the public interest. Alan Jones in particular, just like Newton discovered the first law of motion, Alan Jones has discovered the first law of politics. And the first law of politics, which Jai and I incorporated into our book, Give Us Back Our Country, at any good bookseller. Alan Jones propounded the first rule of politics, which is, does it pass the pub test? Does it pass the pub test? And this young man over here, the senator for New South Wales, Senator Burston, said things the other day in his maiden speech in Parliament which pass the pub test, which aren't heard in Parliament, but which are heard in every day in the pubs across this country. This is so important that we acknowledge and appreciate the talent that we have with Australia as a constitutional monarchy. My duty today, my pleasure and my honour, is to invite you to join in the vote of thanks and to pass that motion for the vote of thanks in the usual way.